Al Sattler is a prominent local environmental leader with the Sierra Club, Los Angeles chapter, former chair of the Palos Verdes South Bay Regional Group. His success in local environmental advocacy includes leading efforts on proper land use, native plants and trail management, political advocacy on the California Legislative Committee as well. He is an environmental policy analyst and commentator with articles on the Sierra Club blog. Please welcome for Earth Month, one of two Earth Month speakers we have today, Al Sattler.
Okay. I was told that I was supposed to speak about how I became motivated to be involved in environmental issues. Am I coming across okay?
Little echo.
Yeah, there's a slight echo, but it's not bad. Keep going.
Okay, sorry. Oh, don't know why. All right. Anyway, so I was lucky. I was raised in a family where we were hiking, so that would start off, and then in college, one of the first Earth Day was started, and in 1972, I was doing a little precinct walking for the Coastal Act, and Coastal Initiative, and the Coastal Act resulted was passed in '76, and this year we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Coastal Act. And I just realized I hadn't started my tongue yet. So anyway, that is one that is quite important. And of course, 1969 was the Santa Barbara oil spill, and being in Harvey Mudd College and in Claremont in 1970, smog was really bad sometimes. So all that helped motivate the Earth Day. And then it was interesting, after Earth Day finished, all the staff from that went over to found another organization called Environmental Action. And they said, what can we do? Well, we're going to be politically active. And they started a campaign called Dirty Dozen, where they called out 12 congressional incumbents who were really bad on environmental issues. And 7 of them did not get reelected. So the power of political advocacy. I'm going to skip forward some. In 2000, the Sierra Club Independent Action, Sierra Club ran a independent expenditure campaign to elect good people to public office, and we started in May and went all the way through to the January senatorial runoff in Georgia. So we got some significant victories in there, and that felt really good, really good. Of course, along the way, the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act both followed right after Earth Day. And to some extent, perhaps the Dirty Dozen campaign motivated some Congress people to vote the right way on that. Also in 1970, the California Environmental Quality Act was passed, which calls for disclosure of projects that will have a significant impact on the environment. The California Environmental Quality Act is abbreviated, or has the acronym CEQA, but I want people to know that just how important it is for people to know what is going on in their backyard and in our greater backyard. People sometimes CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act has come in for some significant bashing for people who say it's holding up progress. Well, not much gets held up with that, and actually last time around, under attack from the governor, who said he was going to hold up the budget unless it was weakened. we now have a weaker California Environmental Quality Act that, among other things, will not give notice for public notice, or does not include significant disclosure for certain advanced technology projects, including recycling and possibly even gravel mining. So anyway, and I'd like to put up I'd like to have Reggie put up the Sierra Club Angeles chapter website showing Sierra Club endorsements currently. And so, yeah, I was hoping to, Reggie, could you go back, could you do the full sequence if possible? It's not going to take that much longer. I just wanted, it's difficult to find the endorsements on the Angeles chapter website if you don't have, at least have some idea where it is, because we're required to have them be 2 clicks away from people first getting on the website. Oh, well, okay. So anyway, our endorsements here, you can scroll down and, oh, you're asking, okay, yeah. So, congressional, and you'll probably, recognize a lot of names in here. There is an error or two in there, and you'll have to excuse me for one significant omission in there. Who's our local congressman? He should be in there. But anyway, so and scrolling down, of course, you'll see some familiar names. And state senate and assembly, and some endorsement decisions are still in process. So that's about all I can say for that. And the Sierra Club endorsed Prop 50, and thank goodness we went on that one. So that actually is much of what I have to say, except that the Sierra Club will be having a fundraiser for its political committee in August, and if I were there, I'd be handing out a flyer. And I also invite you to join the Sierra Club. You can go to sierraclub.org and do that. We need all the help we can get these days, and of course everybody does. But the Sierra Club has a lot of great things going on, and we really are trying to get the right people elected who will help our environment here. Obviously Trump has been horrible on so many things, and we need to have Congress as a backstop, as has already been said. So I yield back the rest of my time, after noting that this is much more time than the 1 minute I'm frequently given at a public hearing. All right.
All right, thank you. I have a question for you, actually.
Yes.
On the endorsements page, there were
Yes.
2 colors. Some people were in green and some were not. What's the significance of that?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
If you go back to that, Reggie, you can throw it up again. Maybe I can figure it out. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm
And
not the keeper of the website, of that website, but I could go back and.
Sierra Club
Oh,
National.
that's bizarre.
I see, okay.
I
And Ted Lieu got left out. Ted got left
That-
out accidentally, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. That
Okay.
is correct. I'm going to have to talk with the webmaster about that one.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
So that's, and again, there are some significant omissions in there that are still, where decision is still in process.
I did want to point out for people who might have missed it that Ben Allen, our current state senator, is endorsed candidate for insurance commissioner. So, and in our state senate race, Shai Roy is the Sierra Club's endorsed candidate, as well as the Democratic Party's endorsed candidate. Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Okay.
Battery's running low? Oh, great. All right. So we have another speaker, and Louis is going to introduce him.
Okay, how's our battery? The wall outlet is solving the problem. Yes. I just want to say it's such a pleasure being part of this club. This is the best club. I'm a member of five different Democratic clubs, and this is number one. Pleasure to do the work, the colleagues, Reggie, first time here working with Connie Sullivan, the legend who opens doors and gets speakers to speak. Thank you for your help with that. For most, climate change is something abstract or uncertain. It's something in the distance. Is it affecting us immediately? When is it going to affect us? For Tristan Hallum, the Director of Scientific Programs with the San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District, it is a reality of constant change. Hallum has 2 decades of mosquito control experience, and we'll discuss how climate change is fundamentally altering the transmission of mosquito-borne diseases by accelerating mosquito life cycles, extending breeding seasons, and expanding their geographic range into previously unaffected areas. Rising global temperatures increase internal temperatures in mosquitoes, as he will explain, causing viruses to replicate faster and spread geographically. By 2070, an additional 4.7 billion people may be at risk for malaria or dengue as these diseases expand into new regions. And Tristan's got the lowdown on the ankle-biting mosquitoes that you would all enjoy so much. So please welcome Tristan Hallum.
Well, thank you so much for that elaborate opening. Again, you took most of my talking points, but that's all right. I'll go into a little further detail. So again, as was mentioned, my name is Tristan Hallum. I'm the Director of Scientific Programs at the San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District. We are one of 5 public health and vector control districts that control the Los Angeles County, ours specifically from the cities of Pasadena all the way over into the Claremont area. Now, many of you are probably very well aware of some of the control measures vector control districts have been performing over the last several years. If you think of those trucks driving through neighborhoods, applying pesticides in order to drop down local mosquito populations, that's been us historically. But in the last several decades, our agencies and the work that we've been performing changes to bringing this information to groups like yours. It's been a heavy shift into educating the public and adapting our practices for a lot of those reasons being the ones that Louis has kind of prefaced with. With our ever-changing climate and increasing temperatures throughout much of the world, we are now seeing a vast expansion of not only what we refer to as the mosquito season. Historically, again, our practices have been from late March, early April through, again, the early to mid-Octobers. Now we're essentially performing mosquito control all year long. We're also expanding much of our work into some of these smaller cryptic sources. Historically, we treat large basins, large water sources, think unmaintained swimming pools, think backyard breeding sources, think, again, large bodies of water. Now we're having to shift those practices to flower pots, to water caps, to my personal favorite explanation of disused toilets. No matter which way you flip a toilet, you smash it up, you break it up, you flip it over, no matter what, it's always going to be holding water. And mosquitoes always need water in order to be able to propagate. And some of these newest species we're starting to see, the Aedes aegypti mosquito, more commonly known as the ankle biters or the yellow fever mosquito. These are the species that primarily take hold in these small, very cryptic water sources. Most concerning for a lot of these species is for decades, specialists in my field had said, "Oh, that's a far off proposition. That's something we would never see in our lifetimes." Well, starting in 2013 and through now, we've consistently been seeing these species as well as others, the Aedes albopictus, the Aedes nondescriptus, different invasive mosquito species, starting to encroach and grow in some of our local areas. Now, just having new mosquitoes is a pain. Again, these are ankle biters. These are ones that are biting far more often and are actively seeking out human hosts rather than many of our native species. But the real crux of the matter is they're also actively spreading disease in our areas. Starting back in 2023, or as early as 2023 in California, we started to see the transmission of local invasive viruses like dengue virus, our district primarily being one of those agencies that have been dealing with the local transmission of that. Now, we have people traveling throughout the world, bringing these viruses all throughout these areas. But the biggest concern for us is less these people traveling and more that transmission within one of these areas. One of our local mosquitoes having bitten one of these people that come into our area, and now they're spreading that virus to additional individuals. Well, now we've seen that in 2023, 2024, and 2025. And we're anticipating having to expand our services even further to be on a more reactionary level for some of these invasive viruses and these invasive mosquitoes to be able to reactionary control these populations in as timely manner as possible. And for an agency like mine, that's not how we are designed and how we've been specifically set up in the past. Special agencies, special districts like ours are proactive operations. We plan our work several years in advance. We are not developing new practices, and yet we've had to. And yet that's the reality and the world that we actively live in now. One of the other instances our agency has had to deal with this last year was the Altadena fires throughout the general area. While many different organizations came together to perform debris removal, to perform remediation for individuals, we were actively on foot in the area treating swimming pools and to ensure that many of these breeding sources would not become a secondary concern for residents like in the area, as well as control individuals that were rebuilding these properties. These are simply structures and simply problems that agencies like mine have historically not been built to be able to manage and not been tasked with being able to control, which is why we were so fortunate to get assistance from FEMA, to assistance from our local health department, from the state as a whole. But these are challenges not all agencies are built equally in order to be able to manage. So what does that mean for individuals like yourselves, for individuals like us? Well, this is a never-changing landscape. As the temperature continues to change, our mosquito season will be getting longer, and more of these invasive issues will become commonplace. And agencies like ours will have to be working with local universities, our health departments to update our practices to be the most efficient controllers of these issues as we can. But that also means that we also need to rely on our residents to be able to perform their control measures and to be reactionary with us as a whole. So I always like to kind of leave these presentations with what can a resident do? What can our local affiliates do to be able to best protect themselves? We have a common talking point of tip, toss, and protect. Tip, standing water sources. Toss, unused containers. And protect with personal repellent. That's going to always be your first line of action in order to be able to prevent mosquito-borne transmissions any place and any time. Secondarily, share these messages. Share mosquito control as a reactionary advent and the practices that we perform as a whole through to different people. Many people are still completely unaware of what vector control is, what we do, and what specifically the purposes of our agencies are. Just passing that word of mouth along is crucial for the work that we do. And lastly, support your local vector control agencies with the work that we are doing. Again, being a public health agency, being one of these long-standing organizations, we have very specific and strict tasks that we try to perform, and we perform them extremely efficiently. But we always need our resident and our public support in order to perform those objectives. I think I'm a little under time, but I appreciate the opportunity to join you all and speak. Again, changing climate is absolutely one of those aspects that affects not only our work, but everyone as a whole. But I would be open and appreciate any questions as well. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tristan. I have a question here for you.
Thank you. Have there been any reported cases of malaria, West Nile virus, or yellow fever in LA County?
West Nile virus is considered an endemic virus. So we do in the state of California, we do anticipate seeing cases annually. At this point in time, there have been no cases of malaria, West Nile virus, or I'm sorry, what was the third virus that you asked about?
Yellow fever.
No, there have no cases of yellow fever either.
Any other questions? Oh, here we.
Hi, thank you. I go to the vector in maybe it's Playa Vista or Culver City area, and I get mosquito fish for my pond. And every now and then raccoons eat them, so I have to get more. But I hope that's helping. I don't know if it's helping, but it's a free service I think people should know.
Mosquito fish are a wonderful source of control. Typically, our agency as well provides residents with mosquito fish for closed water sources. The only issue is because they're technically considered an invasive species as well, you can only use them in closed sources, so swimming pools, ornamental fountains. We are unable to deploy them in larger sources, but for the particular areas that they can control, they're the best.
For, Carol.
Does that include bird baths?
Bird baths, because bird baths drop in their water too quickly, we usually just recommend tipping bird baths or draining them as a whole. If you anticipate the water sustaining in your bird bath for a long period of time, a couple of mosquito fish could maintain the source. But if it's less than a gallon of water, we usually just recommend tipping the source as well.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. I
They-
think we had a question on the chat as well. How do you keep mosquitoes from growing in your rain barrel for water conservation screening? If you can have a screen effectively placed over your water barrel to prevent mosquitoes landing on top of the water, save that water as much as possible. Just make sure that they can't get to it.
Another question here in the room.
Actually, a comment. We have in our barrels, we get, they're donut-shaped mosquito repellent things that we put in the water. My question is, a normally upkept swimming pool, you don't have to treat. Your agency doesn't have to treat, is that right?
100%. Our biggest goal is to work with residents to either make sure that the water is up to par with human use, completely normalized, treated, or is drained. If it's somewhere in between those specific parameters, we try and provide that assistance to ensure that it's not producing mosquitoes. And those donuts you're talking about are actually called mosquito dunks. It's a larvicide that mosquitoes eat on a short period of time that is actually quite effective. The reason that we try not to emphasize that is because it is just it's a intermediary.
So I have a question. I have a bird feeder, bird bath, but we have a water wiggler in there. Doesn't that take care of that?
If the water is regularly agitating, if at the top of the water is moving consistently, then they won't be able to lay their eggs on the water source as well. I would just keep an eye on it as well, not a concern. I think there was another question. How many cases of dengue in LA County? Currently, we have 0. But I would reach out to the health department about those cases as well. They work with us about what that reporting looks like, and they typically get that information prior to us as well.
Any further? Tristan, you're on the front lines of public health, and at least in this respect, what's your professional assessment of how the federal government is doing in that regard?
We need better communication on the federal government's end. We are designed to be a slow-moving ship, moved incrementally in order to be able to move effectively and treat individuals appropriately, as well as treat some of these long-standing sources. And we're not seeing that on a regular basis. For my work on a vector control field, we're having to be extremely reactionary to, again, novel instances that have never been identified in the state of California, let alone in many instances throughout the county. But on the state and the federal level, when brought to some of these concerns, we actually worked with the CDC this last year. When we brought the data, they were always supportive and beneficial, or they were supportive of the work that we were doing. But that required that we had to be doing the work ahead of time. There's another question about would it be beneficial to ban ornamental structures that contain water? I can't speak to that primarily because that's not necessarily something that we're able to do. As a whole, we let individuals perform and do the work that or live how they want, but we have to provide the best recommendations to mitigate public health threats overall. And if specific ornamental structures would be consistently breeding mosquitoes, that's where we would be able to come in and have to talk to a resident about what the structure is and where some of these need to be removed in certain instances.
Tristan, there's another question here. What about, I asked about federal support for public health. What about funding for you from the federal level? Is that intact?
So we are actually funded by private property taxes. So we are kept a few degrees away from any federal specific levels of funding. We are we are entirely funded by the constituents of the San Gabriel Valley. Every year that they have in their property taxes, there's an item included in there for about $20 per parcel, and we're funded by all individual residents as well as all the businesses from that area specifically.
Any other questions for Tristan?
Comment, Wes, no, give me 30
Looks like we're pretty good here. Tristan, thank you so much for joining the meeting today and giving us all the information. And you've really focused my attention on mosquitoes, and I will not be ignoring my standing water in the future. So thank you so much. Give it up for Tristan Hallum.
I know dengue fever or something I do not want. So our next speaker is someone who's an old friend. He's spoken to our club maybe 4 times, but not recently. So I think he's going to be new for most of you. I met Chris Gantner years ago when we were still allowed to table at the farmer's market. Boo, they don't let us do that anymore. And he stopped by the table often and chatted. And one time I asked him what he did, and I found out he was a UCLA history on the faculty at UCLA in the history department. I thought, oh wow, speaker, because I'm always looking for speakers. And it turned out he was a great speaker. And I am now going to turn this over to Louis to do his introduction.
Thank you, Connie. I think that we do have a very interesting speaker here today with a lot of information and a great reputation with the public relations expert here to my right. The recent U.S.-led Operation Epic Fury, and what are they, 9 years old? What a ridiculous name. Involved over 13,000 strikes on Iranian military, nuclear, and infrastructure targets. The large-scale 40-day campaign severely degraded Iranian air defenses, approximately 80% hit, and weapons factories, approximately 90% hit. Iran reported over 2,000 deaths and severe economic damage. As of early 2026, Iranian officials report that over 130 to 140 historic sites, museums, and monuments have been damaged or destroyed in U.S. attacks since February 2026. Key specific UNESCO World Heritage Sites, the legacy of humanity, have sustained damages. Iran responded to the attacks with missiles which targeted the Gulf states, oil infrastructure, attacks on Israel, which included Tel Aviv and Israel's Dimona nuclear facility, causing injuries felt even in nearby towns. The attacks, which saw missiles penetrate airspace near the site, were reported as retaliation for strikes on Iran's Natanz facilities, dangerous given potential nuclear consequences. The Gulf supplies 20% of the world's oil and 30 to 33% of the world's fertilizer via the Strait of Hormuz. Other essentials are helium, sulfur, and aluminum. The immediate results of throttling the strait sent shockwaves through the world's economy, which runs on oil energy, with severe global food shortages and in vulnerable regions, widespread starvation affecting millions by late 2026. Were critical cautionary voices in the Pentagon fired by Trump and Hegseth? Refer back to an earlier presentation here, the Palos Verdes Democrats. In our archives, Dr. Robert Pape reported in November of 2025 here in one of our meetings that the likely answer was yes. How did we get here? Well, thanks to Connie Sullivan, we have the right person to answer that question. The history of that led up to all of this will now be presented to you by Dr. Chris Gantner. He traces the path the world took to this breaking point. Dr. Gantner is a lifelong resident of Los Angeles. Recently retired, he received a PhD in history from UCLA and has taught there at UCLA, also at Santa Monica College and the Claremont Colleges. His scholarly focus is on 20th century American history. Please welcome to the Palos Verdes Democrats, Dr. Chris Gantner.
In person. That's right. This whole Dr. Gantner thing is, I can't write scripts, and I can't advise you on your moles. It's really kind of an honorary thing, and nobody calls me that. They call me Chris. I am retired. I haven't actually given a lecture or talked publicly for a couple of years, so we'll see how it goes. I want to welcome all my fellow boomers here. If I'd known the sort of demographic of today's meeting, I might have prepared a small talk on the material that I'm working with right now. I'm trying to put together a comparative study of two books. Maybe some of you remember the 1969 book, The Making of a Counterculture by Theodore Roszak. He wrote a companion piece 30 years later, The Making of an Elder Culture, Theodore Roszak, and I would recommend it to all of you because it is a call to arms for people of our generation to fulfill whatever dreams, whatever passions, and whatever aspirations that we had when we were young, and how we might go about thinking about that. And I'm comparing the two books because the story is not really a very happy one at this point. But I'm hopeful by seeing you all. I did bring my younger daughter with me today, and she spiked the mean average age down by a couple of decades here. Now, when Louis called me, I am also your emergency desperation speaker. And when Louis called me, he said, well, you can pick your topic. You can talk about Trump. I said, no, I can't talk about Trump. I'm done talking about Trump. Everything's been said. We are all in agreement. We're all in the amen corner. I can't wring my hands anymore. I just can't. We all know what he is. We all know what his administration is. We all know what's going on. We all know how incredibly horrific and damaging all of this is. And I just can't do it anymore. He then said, well, why don't you talk about Iran? Talk about what's happening today in Iran and what's going to happen in the future. And I said, well, I can't do that either. Because I have no idea what's happening in Iran. What time is it? It's, 3:10? Is it open? Is the strait open? Is it closed? Have we bombed? Have we seized a ship? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe what we need to do is like a group wellness check. How are you all doing with your your anxiety levels, on an hour-by-hour basis. I can't talk about that because I have no idea what's going on. And we all are educated, informed people, so we know what's gone on, I don't know, since we entered the room and turned our phones off. What's happening next, I also can't speak to that. I'm sorry, Louis. But I think it's like rule number 9 in the historian's handbook, that we're not allowed to predict the future. We are not allowed to be oracular. What we are allowed to do is take the present moment and place it in some kind of historical context. And I have an hour, right? And that's what I'm going to do for just a few minutes. Given the age of the room and no doubt your high educational achievements, probably everything I'm going to tell you is less important and interesting than the last speaker, who I actually learned quite a bit from. And I'm going to go home into my side yard after this and make sure all my pots are emptied of rainwater. But I do know, and I don't know a lot of Iranian history. I chose American history because there's only like 400 years of it, right? Iranian history, 6,000 years. I mean, have you ever taken a look at this? It's pretty daunting. But I do know quite a bit about American foreign policy, particularly in the 20th century, and American diplomatic history. And I know a fair amount about how the United States and Iran have interacted with each other, or perhaps more accurately, how Iran has been interacted upon the United States for the most part, with a couple of notable exceptions. And I thought, okay, well, how do I frame this? What kind of a device can I use to tell this story? And I've decided that what I want to do is I want to look at more or less the last 80 years, beginning in 1942. And in addition to that, I've come up with a number of dates that I think are pivot points. Now, to say it's a pivot point and things changed in a particular day or a particular year is a conceit. Just like saying the generation of the 60s or the millennials or the Xers or the baby boomers. These are historical conceits that have lots of wiggle room in them and lots of looseness to them, but nonetheless, they are useful conceits. So the dates I want to talk about very briefly, Tony.
No, you have all that.
Huh? No, I already saw her in action. I saw when she starts to walk from the back of the room, it's like she's got the hook, right? 1942, 1953, 1979, 2003, 2015, 2018, 2026. So if we begin in 1942, the West, of course, had already been in Iran. Iran had already found their oil. It's always about the oil, isn't it? It's always about the oil. It's always about the, there was a time, now, of course, they say we're the greatest energy producers on the planet again. I don't know if that's in fact true or not. Maybe with fracking it is. But there was a time when the United States was the center of oil production in the late 19th century, and the center of oil production before Oklahoma and Texas came online was Signal Hill. Yeah, Los Angeles. And you take a look at old photos of Santa Monica and Venice, the shoreline, it's just derrick after derrick after derrick after derrick. They're still working derrick on the campus of Beverly Hills High.
There's one in Century City, in the hospital.
Right.
There's one in West Country.
Right. Pumps out a few dollars, Not much, I suspect, but maybe more today than a month ago. In 1942, When the United States has just entered the war, of course, the British are already in the war, and the Soviet Union are already in the war. Iran is officially neutral. However, the Soviet Union, the British, and the Americans occupy Iran, beginning in 41, 42. They do this primarily for, once again, the oil, and also for rail links and transportation corridors as part of the war effort. And as you recall, the United States, the Soviet Union, and the UK were allies during the Second World War. Now, in 1943, you'll probably also recall that Churchill, Stalin, and Franklin Roosevelt meet in Tehran, one of the three meetings, the other two being Potsdam and, don't tell me, Yalta. And the future of Iran is discussed in 1943 in Tehran between those three allied leaders. And they agree that at the conclusion of the war, they will leave and Iran will be independent and free to pursue its own future. When the war concludes in 1945, the UK and the Americans, as a military occupying force, do leave. The British remain because they're cutting oil deals with the Iranians. The Soviet Union does not leave, not immediately. They are doing the same thing in Iran that they did in Poland, in Germany, in the Baltic countries, and so on and so forth. That remaining in Iran is part of the impetus, if you like, in 46, 47, and 48 for the development of what comes to be known as containment policy. Now, I know you're all probably familiar with this. It's based on a notion promulgated in the American State Department that communism, once the war is over, is an existential threat to the West. And that all communism, wherever it is found in the world, is directed by Moscow. There is only one flavor of communism, and it's Soviet communism. And wherever else you find it, going forward, Vietnam, the Congo, Iran. You know, Cuba's is kind of a special case because they really are a client state of the Soviet Union. But wherever you find Chile, that's a better example from our hemisphere, I think.
Southeast Asia.
Right, Vietnam, absolutely. And containment policy said, we have got to stop it wherever it is, whenever it is, worldwide, because to allow it to take root anywhere is to allow the Soviet Union to have purchase on that region. And because we are in a global competition now with a former ally, we cannot allow it to spread anywhere. And you're probably familiar with things like the domino theory. That's part of this. Now, all of this comes out of a study by a very renowned American diplomat named George Kennan, whose analysis was much more subtle than what was finally designed by the State Department. And that design, that it has to be contained wherever it appears, of course, acted to our detriment many, many, many times over the decades to come. Ho Chi Minh, for example, may have been a communist, may have been, or he may have simply been using communism as a structure to first eliminate the French and then battle the Americans. People argue back and forth about this, but he certainly wasn't directed by Moscow. After 1949 and the Chinese Revolution, they too were not being directed by Moscow. In other words, there were all kinds of flavors of Marxism, socialism, communism, and so forth around the world. but we collapsed them all into one box, and we called it the Soviet Union. We called it Moscow. Iran was one of these test cases early on, as were places like Greece and Cyprus and other places. The United States and the British successfully pressured the Soviet Union to exit in 46, 47, mostly through economic pressure. Not as successful as we know in Poland and in Germany and so forth, but they were successful in Iran. But Iran was one of the places that helped promulgate containment and this sort of flat, two-dimensional idea of what communism was throughout the world. The British remained because they had an oil concession, a deal that they cut with the Iranian government. Now we have to make a little detour here and talk about the Iranian government. Since 1906, the Iranian political system was what you might call a constitutional monarchy. You had a monarch, a Shah, but you also had an elected parliament who chose a prime minister. Now, the model is not the same as it was in Great Britain, for example, where the Shah or the Queen in Great Britain or the King was more or less a figurehead, a cultural figure, not really a political one. The Shah did have power, but as did the legislature, and they were forever at each other's throats, trying to enlarge their sphere of power, their sphere of influence, and the prize was always the military. We've always been so lucky in this country to have an apolitical military. It's another question about today that is very disturbing for another day. But if you think about authoritarian regimes, shaky regimes around the world, you always see the military as a political player. And every authoritarian in the world knows he or she, mostly him, mostly men, maybe almost always men, know that they have to take care of the military because that's their bulwark against the dissent of the people. And the people will always dissent loudly, quietly, or not at all, except in their minds, with authoritarianism. The Shah, the old Shah, had been removed by the British and the Americans and the Soviets in 42.
Didn't he have pro-Hitler leanings?
Exactly. He was pro-German, so they remove him and they install his son, Reza Pahlavi. He's the one we all think of when we think of the Shah. They install Pahlavi, Reza Pahlavi. There's also a parliamentary state that is functioning. So that's kind of where we are between 1942, with the stop in 1946 and pushing the Soviets out, but the Soviets demonstrating their hegemony, their expansionist desires, which helps us to understand containment and how that policy comes about. Our next stop is 1953 in this story. In 1951, a man named Mohammad Mossadegh is elected by the parliament to be prime minister. Mossadegh represents a couple of different ideas. One is Iranian nationalism, but another is economic and social independence from particularly the British. The Iranians have made a pretty crummy deal for the oil. The British are getting the lion's share, and he just decides, I'm going to nationalize the oil industry, which he does, and throws the British out. We don't need them. Now, of course, the British had built all the infrastructure, had supplied everything that was necessary, if you like, to extract and then ship. Mossadegh throws them out. Here comes containment policy again. What could be more communist than a government taking control of a private business, of particularly an important resource like oil? It's Marxist, it's communist, it's socialism. It must be Moscow. The United...
He loved democracy. He was such a good man.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
He was very, and Truman wouldn't go along with it. It was finally to convince Eisenhower to do it. I'm sorry, but my husband lived this. My husband came from there. I'm sorry.
And that represents, I've had many students over the years who were Iranian, mostly in the Iranian diaspora. And the passion that they have still for what happened in 1953 is profound. This is a culture that does not forget. We're a culture that forgets everything. It's true. It's true. We dream about the future. They dream about the past, in a sense. And by the way, that nationalism and that pride, whether you want to call it Persian pride or Iranian pride, that pride is activated at a very powerful level if Iran is, attacked. And people that might be on the bubble, might be pro-American, anti-Ayatollah, when the attack comes, it activates that nationalism. And we create more resistance with our actions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And that's true. That's why
It's true of most countries.
Yeah. Invasions, always kind of.
Right.
Invade a country.
So the Americans have containment policy. They want to get rid of Mossadegh because he's a communist. The British want to get rid of Mossadegh because he's picked their pocket as far as they're concerned. So the CIA, our old friends, and MI6.
I know.
You know, you got to hand it, though, to the old guys. At least they were competent at their perfidy. You know, now, this crowd now, it's like you can't even be proud of how evil they are, because they do it so badly, I mean, I could say, good American evil there, really well done, but they're just, no, okay. I don't want to talk about that stuff. MI6 and the CIA contact, fund, and promote units within the Iranian military. Remember, the military is always important, and help them to foment a coup against Mossadegh, who is removed. At that point, the Shah is elevated to a position of absolute authority. We think he's going to be our best friend. He's a pretty good friend, but he also remains a friend of the Soviet Union. Remember the whole first world, second world, third world deal. First world, I mean, the third world is not like, as our president likes to sometimes talk about certain kinds of countries. That's the one. Better you say it than me. That's not necessarily the third world. First world is the West, United States, Europe, Oceania, Japan, you throw Mexico in there. In other words, countries that are aligned with the United States and later on with NATO. Second world is the Soviet bloc and other countries that, like Cuba, that are aligned with the Soviets. The third world are the non-aligned countries, India, Egypt, countries like that, who play a game for decades of sort of playing the Soviets and the Americans off against each other. Soviet Union says, you want a dam? We build you a dam, right? And we say, well, we'll build you a highway or a bridge or whatever. And the third world countries, they play this game for a long time. The Shah plays that game. He is very friendly to the United States and he buys a ton of military equipment from us. Boy, does he like those airplanes. But he stays close to the Soviet Union as well. Now, the Shah has two aspects, in my opinion. One is he is not non-secular. He is a very secular guy. And he's a guy who's very interested in modernizing. He's certainly facing the West when it comes to the modernizing impulse. And he's not interested in an Islamic or theocratic state. In fact, he's very disinterested in that. But the second part of the Shah is he is a ruthless authoritarian. He will brook no dissent. He is willing to jail, to execute, to exile anyone who looks sideways. If you're the Shah's friend, you can do business, you can get rich. If you're his enemy, pain and more pain. All authoritarians encourage a backlash. And in Iran, between 1953 and 1979, there is a growing cohort of dissenters, not just supporters of ultimately the new Ayatollah, but communists, socialists, anarchists, liberals, all kinds of people who are all working, if you like, to somehow weaken the Shah and bring him down. He knows this. He knows this, and this is why there's so many jailings and executions. This is why Khomeini is exiled to France, for example. You cannot, if you are an authoritarian, brook dissent getting a toehold. So he's ruthless. He's vicious. But that's okay with us. We've gotten into bed with a lot of unsavory characters over our post-war history. If they were aligned with us, if you like, economically and maybe sort of politically, but economically aligned with us. Our interests and your interests are the same. The Shah, however, by the middle of the 1970s, is aging, he's ailing, and the dissent has grown sufficiently large and vocal that he knows his days are numbered. And eventually, that dissent overwhelms him. Yes?
Don't you think that his starting OPEC was probably one of the reasons as why our CIA and England's, it's my opinion that they stepped in and caused that change.
That I don't know.
I don't feel it's just a weakness of it.
That I don't know. I've always understood that it was primarily internal dissent. I would have to look at that.
Trust the CIA.
You don't?
I think they would never get.
Well, I suspect they probably never left.
You're right on that, because
But-
they created Salah.
Savak, the security services of the Iranian autocrat, vicious security services, certainly operated with an understanding that the United States would not be bothered by the trammeling of human rights. No doubt. Absolutely no doubt about that. I've always understood that most of the pressure that came to bear on the Shah was internal. And I think one of the reasons that you can argue that is because when the Shah does fall and leaves the country, and Khomeini is called back from, I think he was in Paris, is called back from Paris and says, I will not establish a unilateral Islamic state. It will be a liberal state, and then immediately begins establishing a repressive Islamic state. And the first thing they do is they eliminate all the other dissenters who are not Islamists. So all the communists, all the Marxists, all the liberals. They know who some of them are. And after the Shah is allowed to land in the United States in 1979 to seek medical care, after Carter gives him temporary privileges to seek medical care in the United States, and the students then overwhelm the embassy, one of the things the students did was grabbed all of the shredded papers, and they spent, I don't know, months, years, reassembling them all in huge indoor stadiums, specifically for one purpose, to find any Iranian citizen's name in any of those papers. You might have been in the Ministry of Agriculture in Iran in 1971. And you went to the American Embassy and had a meeting with an attaché from the American Agriculture Department on short grain rice. If your name was on that piece of paper, you were done. You were gone. It was an epic purge of anyone who would offer resistance to the new Ayatollah. In a way, it was meet the new boss, same as the old boss. It just, instead of a westernized non-secular, it was an increasingly insular, secular society where the repression was now not on the dissent of the Shah, but on a dissent as it was imagined by against his version of Islam. Also, it was just an exercise in raw power. My colleagues argue forever, was it really about religion or was it really just about power? I'm going to leave that to them and their conference attending journal publishing ways. I tell you what, you have never met a more barbaric group of people than academics when they are arguing some incredibly fine point about something. It's life or death. And, you know, and you don't really feel a knife going in until you see the puddle of blood because it's always so polite.
It's always in the back.
Well, for sure. Or it's always hidden in the middle of what's almost impenetrable scholarly prose, right? Yeah. Henry Kissinger once said he learned diplomacy at Harvard, but he also said the smaller the stakes, the bigger the fight. And, you know, and it's really true. So after 1979, I guess we could say that the Cold War period for Iran is over, but the nascent war on terror, even though we don't give it that name for another 15 years, has begun. 47 years passed, but there are some dates that are important here for us to understand why we're where we are right now, and why when you see demonstrations in Iran, you don't see very many these days because nobody wants to stick their head out with Hegseth doing his Hegsethian thing when he's not misquoting scripture. Can you believe that?
How do you make a mistake like that? Pulp Fiction. Because he's super, yeah.
How can he even walk in his head where he has it?
Well, at least he's not drinking. He said, well, if I get confirmed for the job, I won't take another drink. Well, I don't know if any of you know an alcoholic, but I know quite a few of them, and I've heard a lot of promises. And they almost never come true. Excuse me. There's a reason why when you see these demonstrations, it's the American flag and it's the British flag that are always being burned, stomped on, and so on and so forth. I mean, they might even hate the British more than they hate us. But we're a close, well, Trump's so sui generis, you can't, you know, who knows what any of it means. I'm really glad that I'm 75 years old and you know, I'm just about ready to go. And not quite yet, honey. And got to get you married off first. Because I'm not going to have to participate in any of the postmortems of Donald Trump that historians are going to be doing for decades. I'm really grateful I don't have to get involved in that in any way, shape, or form. All right. 2003, I have written down here. Why is that? Well, that's the year that we invade Iraq. And I think that's another pivot point, particularly when we consider the Iranian appetite for the export of terror. And make no mistake about it, they are a mass exporter of terror throughout the region and around the world. In 2003, we invade Iraq. We topple Saddam. Now, this is another one of these things. We can litigate that forever. But there is one thing for our purposes today that we can say, and that is Saddam represented a bulwark against the Ayatollah's hegemony in the region. He was a check on those ambitions. So amongst all the other brilliant outcomes we achieved, we unleashed much higher levels of terrorist ambition and the ability to carry that out on the part of Iran after 2003. We weren't in Iran, we were in Iraq, but boy did Iran benefit from us toppling Saddam and fracturing that society.
Don't you think of that as like Middle East 101?
I do.
I mean, it's like, how did they not know this?
Well, you know, apparently it was almost a year after we invaded Iraq before Bush understood that there was something called Sunni and something called Shia. I would assume that George Bush, and boy, I'd take him back in a second, you know. I'd take Nixon. I'd take Reagan. I'd take Calvin Coolidge. I don't care, you know. That's a maybe.
Hey, Carol, people on Zoom can't hear you, so can we maybe hold it off until the question?
Okay. Carol's even deeper into it than I am. We certainly accomplished that in 2003. And we also, of course, helped to unleash Iran's nuclear ambitions. And with a little help from their friends like the Pakistanis, who probably got a little bit of help from the North Koreans, and so on and so forth. Or maybe it was the Pakistanis helped the North Koreans, and then the North Koreans, you know. But they all helped each other. The North Koreans benefited greatly because they needed that hard currency. And what is a better thing to sell than nuclear technology, nuclear weapons technology? So we've unleashed their ambitions. We've made it much easier for them to export terror throughout the region. We have activated their atomic or nuclear, I guess I should say, ambitions. And we go down that road. And we go down that road until my next pivot point, 2015. That is the year that the Obama administration successfully negotiates, oh boy, the JCPOA. Joint, I know it. Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Aren't you impressed? That's what, you know, when I go for my my physical, because of my age now, you know, you have to do that cognitive stuff, right? You draw the clock and all that stuff. My doctor says, what's the JCPOA? You know. He's going to get me one of these years, you know. I love it, though. He says, well, can you draw a clock? I said, yeah, and he leaves the room, and I got one right here. You know, is that cheating? Every year, right? Silver, giraffe, chair. I aced it. Every year I aced it, and they say it's very, very hard. It's very hard. No one has ever aced it like I did. No one. I do it so well. I ace it so well, they're giving them to me every month now. Just to be in awe. We know what this deal was. The Iranians agree not to enrich uranium above a certain level, 30%, something like that. They agree to pretty rigorous oversight by the Atomic Energy Agency. Now, we shouldn't really trust the Iranians, but we tried to put into place as much oversight as we could. And we unfreeze money that had been sitting in European and American bank accounts since 1979. Now, our current president says, we paid them. No, it was their money. We unfroze it. Pallets of $100 bills, $1,000 bills, $1 million bills. That was an improvement. We were talking to them about this. We were, you know, the art of diplomacy is you have to be patient. And the team that we sent over to deal with the Iranians that year included a Nobel Prize winner who knew about nuclear energy, the Secretary of State, John Kerry, Wendy Sherman, an amazing diplomat, and others. Now, of course, that was not the A team. The A team is Jared and Witkoff. And you do a little business on the side, you know, a little crypto. Boy, I tell you what, I'm taking way too much time here. Well, we know the next pivot point and why that's important. 2018. Donald Trump comes into office and says, Obama negotiated this? We're out. We're out. Take off the safeguards. Now, I guarantee you, I'm not supposed to tell the future, but I guarantee you one thing. If Trump manages to get out of this without killing us all, and he says, I got a great deal, it's going to be just like the deal Obama got, except not as good. I guarantee it, you know. See, I teach, my specialty is something called American intellectual history, which is the history of American thought, which includes a lot of diplomats and a lot of philosophers and a lot of institutional thinkers. And although I don't always agree with them, my God, they were smart and they were strategic. They were thoughtful. It just, you know.
That's why you retired, because they are no longer there.
You know what? I'll tell you what. I'll tell you why I retired. I couldn't grade one more paper. I just couldn't do it. They made me teach on Zoom for 2 years, and I couldn't do that. And they said, oh, you know what? Enrollments are up. We're making more money. Let's just do Zoom from here on out. I couldn't do it. And the third one was ChatGPT was just coming over the horizon. And I said, I don't want any part of that. I don't want to figure it out, you know? And I certainly don't want to be a cop trying to figure out if my students are cheating or not, you know? Had no interest in any of that. Plus, I'm old. No, that's okay. That's okay. And in retrospect, the fact that I retired before Trump got reelected was a really good thing. Because when he was president the first time, I would drive to school on my secret route, PCH to Overland to Santa Monica to Westholme, Golden. And I would listen to Rush Limbaugh on the radio. And I would get into the lecture hall and I would spend the first 20 minutes rebutting him. The students had no idea what was going on, right? But I was so worked up by the time I got there, you know? One time I drove to school all the way when my children were young, and the whole time I drove, it was Barney songs. And I said, why is NPR playing Barney? You know, and it was a cassette, one of my kids' cassettes. I drove all the way to UCLA listening, it's, you know, let's be friends, let's be friends. Better than listening to Limbaugh, probably. That brings us to our last pivot point, 2026, and we all know what happened. That's not history anymore, that's current events. That's, what is it, the cliche? The first draft of history. We're living through the first draft of history right now. But looking at these pivot points and looking at how American ideology operated, both in the Cold War with containment and then in the inability to appreciate the diversity below the surface in Iranian society and to collapse it into this, it's an Islamic monster. We failed. We failed in our imagination. We failed particularly after 2015 to keep the ball rolling. Once Trump was elected, he just reversed everything. Diplomacy requires patience. It requires time, and it requires a lot of give and take. You cannot prosecute international relations from a maximalist perspective. A maximalist bully, by the way. That's where we are. That's part of where, we came from and how we got there. That's way too long. But this has been kind of fun for me. I don't know about you, but this is really much better than Zoom. This is so much better than Zoom. I needed a hit. You have no idea. You teach, I had 200 students in a class, but it's on Zoom, right? All their mics are turned off. I'm sitting in the garage with my dog, talking to a box, and it's not reacting to me. I don't know if they're laughing. I don't know if they're screaming. I don't know what. Only about half of them turn their cameras on, right? And I would say, can you turn your camera? Oh, it doesn't work. It's broken. Oh, at least some of them are kind of honest and say, well, my hair looks really awful. My guess is a lot of them log on and then just go and do something else. I don't think they ever understood that I've never taken role in my life. Show up, don't show up. This is college, you do your thing. But it was just awful.
So, that gives us time.
She's cutting me off.
I'm glad we could provide a little therapy for you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, this was therapeutic. All right.
No, but people are going to have questions.
Okay.
We have a little time for questions.
We have one more really great speaker, so let's get like about 10 minutes.
It's up to you.
Okay. All right.
I can stay all week.
So people will ask questions and then please repeat so the online.
Oh, right. Oh, that's why this is here.
Yes.
No, because I'm normally a pacer.
Okay. Question. Just real repeat.
Would you consider a pivot point the Iran and Iraq war?
Would I consider the Iran-Iraq war a pivot point? Yes, certainly. I didn't include it in here for reasons of brevity, but yes, absolutely I would. It doesn't engage the American element quite as much, although we do support Saddam in that war. So we're the best of friends, I tell you, right? I once heard someone say something I thought very smart, which was, countries don't have friends, they have interests. And those interests change over time. So it was in our interest once to support Saddam, and then it wasn't. Sir.
Yes, I have the luxury or the misfortune of having Republican friends. And when the subject of Iran comes up, they say, oh, the agreement that Obama made in 2015, they didn't allow the inspectors in, so how can we trust that they were abiding by it? Can you comment on that?
Well, I don't believe that's true. Oh, yeah. The gentleman has Republican friends. I have Republican relatives. I have MAGA relatives. Yeah, it's challenging. And they say that the deal was no good because there was no inspection regime as part of the deal. I don't believe that's true. I believe that there was, in fact, an inspection regime, and it was relatively rigorous. Yeah.
My understanding was that the Iranians were largely complying with the agreement that they had agreed to do. They were largely doing it.
Well, that's my understanding, too. On the other hand, countries have interests, and it may have been in their interest to hide, a parallel program, and they may have.
Couple more questions? Oh, how about back here?
I have a comment and I have a question. When you mentioned Shah was secular in Iran, I think he was secular, but he was very religious. And to fight communism, he was letting the religious people loose to establish networks and systems that we could operate, that helped them operate. But he was fighting the communists a lot, very hard.
The Iranian communists, yeah.
And my question is, if you have any information about the interest of Iranians who wanted to establish a steel manufacturing refineries ever since 1942, and they were not successful, and that's why maybe Shah was favoring the Soviets to get the steel made from there?
I don't know about that specific. Oh, the question was.
Using religion to fight communism.
Right. Did the Shah use religion to fight communists? Absolutely, because communists were godless. Yes. And was the Soviet Union helpful in establishing a steel industry in Iran? That I don't know that specific. I do know that the Shah, like many of these third world countries, were successful in extracting all kinds of development monies and projects from both the Soviet Union and the United States. Dean, yes.
In our longer history, I'm asking you because you're the history guy, have we ever been this far out of whack as far as a country? It seems like, we're way off where we should be.
Okay, were you the dean of students or the dean of?
I was the dean of technology at community college.
I love community colleges. I taught at Santa Monica College for a long time. Great. The dean of technology wants to know, have we ever been, whenever I'd see a dean coming, I would, across campus, I would just step behind a tree, and let him or her pass quietly, undisturbed. The dean of technology wants to know, have we ever been this out of whack?
With the rest of the world.
Oh, with the rest of the world? Or at home? And just in general? I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean, we've had some funky stuff happen, but yeah, we had the Civil War. But you can explain the Civil War. I can't explain this. And I'm telling you, I think the entire country, or at least half of us, are having a nervous breakdown. I really do. I'm tense all the time. Yeah. No.
More questions?
I have a question. So Trump was reelected partly on the strength of a shift of young people towards him. What was your perspective on what was going on campus that would make young people think that this was a good idea?
What do I think was going on campus for young people to think this was a good idea? I'm not sure that the campus population was representative of the larger cohort of young Americans. I don't know. My experience with my students has, for the most part over the years, they're trying to figure out how to get a good grade so they can get into law school. And that's number one. And number two is how quickly can I get back to the keg and the bong? But that might be a little cynical. I don't think that probably the students in my classes were representative of the larger cohort of American youth. So I don't know. Okay. Thank you so much.
You did great. Oh, look, standing ovation. I think that's a... Okay. Okay, we have what? So we've been international, and now we're going to go very local. So I'm going to turn the program over to Louis again to introduce our last speaker.
Thank you, Connie. Just to clarify, Henry Kissinger, quote, "The reason that university politics is so vicious is because the stakes are so small." Just to make that clear. Anyway, that was great. You were fantastic. My gosh. That was great. We got an inquiry to make a presentation here, I think last session. And I thought, well, this is a matter of public safety and civic import and public policy, and it's just kind of thing that fascinates me. And then I read everything about it. What I'm talking about is, I think, Measure PF is what it's called, I believe. Do I have this right? That's right. So, and also it's a big public safety issue. The city of Palos Verdes Estates, one of the four cities on the peninsula, needs to fund their police service. And so to talk about that is very important, I think. And here to talk about it is Kate Greenberg. Kate, come on up. Oh, here. Sorry. I'm sorry, I situated. I thought you were over there. All right, there you go.
Hello, everybody. Boy, Dr. Chris, you are a tough act to follow, especially when your topic is taxes. Did you write any books? I want to read them.
I'll talk to you.
Okay. How many of you live in the estates? Okay, a good handful. The rest of you can now go to sleep. No. I'm going to try to be a little bit informative, and I know we're kind of at the end of the session, so I don't want to run over. But Palos Verdes Estates, as you know, is one of four cities on the hill. It's the oldest of the four, and it has many, many things in common with its sister cities, things that we love, its proximity to the ocean, its distance from the urban centers, and, beautiful surroundings and gorgeous weather. PVE, unlike the sister cities, has always had a parcel tax since 1980, following the passage of Prop 13, Howard Jarvis Amendment, that restricted increases in property tax. And we're really unique in California because everywhere else that I've ever been in the United States, and I can't speak for every state in the union, but certainly where I grew up on the East Coast, the local assessors, whether it's county or city, reappraise your home every year or every few years, and you get reassessed at the current market value of your house. Here, your tax begins at the purchase price of your house, and it can only go up 2% a year. Also, unlike our other cities, we don't contract with we were late to the party in joining the county fire group. So when you all joined from Rancho PV and Rolling Hills Estates and Rolling Hills, you were part of the founding group of the LA County Fire District. We came in 1986 after we disbanded our own fire department, and at the time it looked like it was going to be a big cost savings. Hasn't proved to be, but we actually pay quite a bit more. We contract, we're not part of the group. You pay through your property taxes that go to the county. And interestingly, we get 11 cents on the dollar from the county tax. You folks get, in the other cities, you get less, but you get the equivalent of 17 cents on the dollar because the cost of your fire services is taken out of that tax. So we're different in that way. The biggest way in which we differ is that we have no commercial activity whatsoever. I mean, we have an ice cream place and a couple of little restaurants in Malaga Cove, and we have another ice cream place and a couple of coffee places in Lunada Bay, but that's it. And the residents who have been there for a long, long time really like that quiet. I'm not originally from there, so sometimes I scratch my head when it comes tax time and think, gee, maybe it would be nice to have a hotel here, or maybe a restaurant where you could actually have a glass of wine, or but the people who live there, they really feel that this is a special thing about the city, and they don't want commercial enterprise. But our costs are not, it's not free to run a city. For 4 years, I was treasurer, and I can tell you where every debit and credit goes. Does government operate efficiently? And I know I have a room full of Democratic friends here, but honestly, it could do better. And that's partly just the nature of government, that you have turnover, you have politics, I guess is what I'll say. But anyway, Measure PF is a tax that will replace the existing parcel tax, but it also expands it because we really didn't. The current Measure E was passed in a hurry after a parcel tax failed in 2017. We went without that money, which represents about 20% of our budget for a whole year. That was $5 million at the time. It would be worth $6 million today based on earning interest at the Treasury note rate. 5-year Treasury notes is kind of what we invest in municipalities. But we also, it was really, we lost $45 million because the tax that failed it was the same rate as the current Measure E, but it was a longer term. It went for 12 years instead of 9 years. And it also had a cost of living increase. Since 2017, there's been 32% cost of living increase in Los Angeles area. And we had a 6% annual increase in Measure D that failed. Measure E had none. So we've basically been operating at that level for the last 10 years. PF stands for police and fire. The tax pays for the entire budgeted cost of police and fire. It doesn't pay for anything else. It does free up funds for city council to use for the other items that are desperately needed, particularly since we've been on an austerity budget for 10 years, squeezing every penny, deferring much needed maintenance and repair of our infrastructure and capital. So I can tell you where it's going to go, but at least I can now tell you that it is committed, this money, to police and fire. It will be audited independently, separate from the rest of the city audit, to make sure that no funds are misdirected. So there is accountability. A lot of people ask, well, gee, since we need so much infrastructure, we need capital, we need more people, we need better technology, why don't you allocate a portion of the tax to all those different categories? Well, how many of you have any financial background? What is true about every financial forecast that's ever developed?
Optimistic. Totally optimistic.
Well, it's wrong, basically. And it does tend to be often optimistic, but it's wrong. And the longer out your forecast goes, does it get more accurate? If you thought it was a good idea, the ability to try to parcel out this tax to each of these categories would be extremely difficult. Add to that city expenditures, unlike your expenditures, most of our expenditures in a home, we have those maintenance and repair issues too, certainly, but, generally, the cost of food over the year is about the same cost of clothing. We don't have big lumpy expenditures normally, but in a city where you're doing capital projects, some of those take years and they cost millions. And whether you're going to finish, you're not going to do 10 at once. It's the timing of those is variable, and so you can have bigger costs in one year, flatter costs in another year. So it's not as easy to predict what the stream of expenditures is going to be. The tax is quite a bit higher than Measure E, which was put in place as a Band-Aid. When Measure D failed, they had to get a tax passed quickly. I mean, we couldn't go another year without some funding. So they intentionally came up with a low number and no inflation increase to make sure it passed, with the intention of going back shortly thereafter and putting a better tax in. Unfortunately, lots of things happened in the meantime, one of which was COVID. But in addition, we've had two of the rainiest seasons ever, 2020 to 21 and 22 to 23 were historically rainy seasons. So trying to keep up with the maintenance of the weed abatement and tree trimming and clearing the brush for fire safety reasons it got enormously expensive. Everybody in Southern California was chasing the same companies to do this work, and because the preceding seasons were very dry, and so they had contracts that maybe were insufficient, but everybody is now competing for the same labor sources. The costs went sky high, and the ability to keep up with the maintenance really suffered. So the tax that is in place is about $5 million a year. This one is going to be $16.25 million. And it's going to have a 3% per annum increase for inflation. And that sounds like a big increase. It is. But when you look at it on an individual homeowner basis, and particularly in the context of what I see in other parts of the country, if you have a 3,000 square foot house, which is about the average sized home in PVE, you're going to pay about $3,000 a year. $1,500 in April and $1,500 in December. My brother has a house in New Jersey that might be worth $600,000-700,000. He pays $50,000 a year in property tax, and it goes up regularly. So, they don't have Prop 13, and that's something that we benefit from, but we also, there's a cost. The nice thing about this money too is that it all goes to PVE. Unlike the county tax where we get 11 cents and you guys get 17 cents, we get 100% and we need it. The city is over 100 years old. The infrastructure, it was incorporated in 1939, but as most of you know, it was founded in 1923, and a lot of that infrastructure is 80, 90 years old, and it breaks. And the easiest way to balance your city budget, I've discovered, is you just postpone that little repair or maintenance until it becomes a ginormous problem. You know, if you ignore that leaky roof and hope you don't have a rainy winter next year, in 5 years, you might have been able to get away with a, $5,000 or $10,000 expense. Now you got to replace the whole roof, and it's $30,000. So, it's a very similar kind of situation. The Measure E cost, so for the same size house, was about $1,000. So it is, it's triple the amount of money. But if you think about this on a monthly basis, I know my husband and I waste $250 a month on stuff we don't need. How many duplicate subscriptions do we have? I know we have 2 Disney subscriptions. I got to cancel one. But, it's not as serious or as painful, I think, as some people would like to make out. And, we do have our opposition, and they complain that it's 3 times as much. Oh, we don't need the money. They complain that the city we just need to tighten our belts. Well, since Measure D failed, and we went without that money in 2018, we've reduced headcount from 63 people to now it's 47. We've taken 10 people out of the police department, and as a result, we have morale issues, and we have overtime, burnout. We have a wonderful police force, and they tend to stick with us. Who's from RPV here? I know, you folks are having trouble getting enough coverage from the sheriff. They actually approached us to see if maybe we might do some kind of a joint powers thing. Knowing how quickly municipalities move, I think that might be off in the distant future. But, I think all cities struggle, and I know that Rancho PV is trying to develop some kind of a more local, I don't know if it's volunteer-based type thing. You folks probably know, but there was a big article in the Daily Breeze about it. So everybody needs safety. Compared to the sheriff, and we've actually measured this, our response time, emergency response time by our police department is 2 minutes. The average for the sheriff is 10. That's why people who live in PVE really love the local fire department. they are special. All of us have a story about something that is, yes, I'm getting the hook. Anyway, any questions? Yeah. And I'm sorry if I put you all to sleep with that lovely talk.
I have a question.
I'm a resident, longtime resident of PV.
Okay.
Very supportive of the police, and my wife was involved on the city council for 8 years.
Oh, good.
But my question is, can you comment on the impact of churning of employees impacting our pension liability and how that has affected the measure?
Yeah, the question was, there has been some turnover in the employees locally, not just on the fire department, but the rest of the crew, more than we'd like. Part of that is because of our inability to pay competitive rates. Part of it is the frustration of having to deal with less than they need constantly. As far as the impact on pensions, pensions are, that would be a whole speech. But the basic issues that affect pensions, when someone leaves your city, if they worked for you for 4 years, you still have a little bit that you have to pay that's factored into your long-term pension obligation. It doesn't really affect you if they come and go as much, because then you get somebody new to replace them and you're just paying pension again. The good news is that since 2013, the law was passed that there's a different plan for folks that came in 2013 or after. So eventually, as the folks who are still participating die off, sorry to say, but the pensions will go down.
Okay, we have a question on
Yes, sir.
and then Connie.
Once you get Connie's in.
Connie, go ahead with your question.
Can you speak to why it's so important that we pass it in June?
Oh, thank you. Really good question. Measure E expires a year from this June. If we don't pass this tax in June, we're really running out of time. We absolutely then have to get something on the ballot by November if we could. And the benefit of a citizen-led initiative, which is what we're doing here, is we only need 50% plus one person to pass it. Whereas if we had a city council-sponsored initiative, you need 67%. And that's hard. Even Prop 13 didn't pass by 67%. Yes, ma'am.
Comment. I would like for you to remind your voters in your area to remember the Palisades. They were slow
Thank you.
in doing their due diligence and maintenance of those properties. And part of that fire mayhem was because the roads were not wide enough to accommodate tons of. So be diligent.
Absolutely. That's a really, really, really good point. And the additional money, not only do we keep the firemen paid, but that money is critical. We have 30% open space in PVE. Without any care, we've got 20,000 trees, all non-native. That's just kindling, if we don't maintain it, and it costs money to do that. Thank you.
So your last comment would be?
Vote June 2nd, please. If you have friends in PVE, tell them it's important. We need this tax. It's not too much. It's part of repaying the $45 million we lost when we failed to pass Measure D. And if they don't want a hotel and they don't want a car dealership and a nice shopping center, then this is what it's going to do. This is what it's going to cost.
I have a
Yeah,
question.
thank you.
I had a question.
There's a question? Oh.
I have a question.
Done.
Yes. I have a question. The difference between Palos Verdes Estates and the other three cities is we contract with the sheriff's department and PVE chooses to have its own police force, which I think costs a lot of money. Could you speak to what the difference is in what you folks pay versus what the other cities are paying for police services?
That's a good question. Actually, it really is not appreciably different. People like to say, oh gosh, you have your own police force and look at your pensions. Believe me, the sheriffs have pensions as well. And you lose local control. We negotiate with our police union about wage increases, salary increases. You don't have any control over what the county does. And we, because we came late to the party, as I said, we pay much more. I mean, our fire contract has gone up much more significantly than our police costs, which we have we've really squeezed and squeezed. We took 10 positions out, and we probably need to replace at least 3 or 4 of those.
And where can we, is there anywhere that shows that comparison?
You can, I will look at our website to see if we have those numbers, but you can go to your city's website and you can look at their annual financial reports and you can see what they pay.
Yes, I know I can for my city. I just was wondering for PV Estates.
Oh, sure.
We did a comparison back in Measure D, a very
Yeah.
comparison between the two.
Yeah.
Still appreciable savings.
No, we actually did explore the possibility of going with the sheriff, and not only were we going to lose response time, we weren't going to save any money. So this was after Measure D failed. We had 2 studies done, and we contacted the county, and we had them look at servicing us for sheriff. It was negligible.
The sheriff's department say they could not take on it?
Well, now they can't. At the time, they could have. This was back before 2020. They could have, but it wouldn't have saved us money, and we would have had reduced service time.
So it's not a possibility. They didn't hear what you said on Zoom, but it was pointed out that the sheriff's department says they can't even take us on right now, so it's a non-issue. And I do recall way back when we were thinking about switching to the sheriff's department and all the discussions on next door about how our police go out on disability retirements. And I ran the county's workers' comp program, and I want to tell you, the sheriffs go out on disability retirements too, you know. Anyway, okay, thank you. Yeah. All right, so that's our entire program. Thank you, everybody.